Okay, so let's make these a little bit smaller. All right, so watch this just to get a, I think it just helps you understand like what your logo might have to face. Now, one thing that we all know is that there's some colors for logos that are just all, okay, the orange ones stick out to me. So something like the Home Depot logo, that orange is a little hard to replicate if you just overlap cyan and yellow. And so a lot of times companies that can afford it are going to add a fourth or fifth or sixth color into the mix because the printers will specifically mix an orange. So rather than just have yellow mixed with magenta, like most people would, they're going to pay for that extra orange to be pre-mixed and added in. So sometimes the idea of CMYK printing certainly is there, but sometimes you're going to use it your own color. But again, that can get expensive. So watch this one. It just gives a brief overview, but I think it's helpful. These ones are talking about the actual printing process. So some of the terms that you'll see will make more sense when you see how this stuff actually works. They're very short, but like how does commercial printing work? Very simple. And then the bleed part is something that we haven't talked about yet, but this is a good description of it. The only time you're going to need to worry about this one is when you do your business card. That's the only thing I'm going to ask you to really consider as a bleeded object. So a bleed, as you'll see in the video, but I'll just talk about it really quick, is anything that's a photograph or a color that goes to the edge. You can't print to the edge, right? You guys all know that. There's always like a 1/4 inch around that's white because it just won't print. So when you are printing this for a commercial printer or even at our printing on campus, they've printed this on a larger sheet of paper, and their file actually has extra blue going out by a 1/4 inch. Or if there was a photograph, same thing, a little bit of a 1/4 inch of a photograph, and then it gets printed and then it gets chopped down. So what we see are chopped versions of everything. Pretty much everything gets chopped, even if you don't think it needs to, because it's just part of the process. It's assumed that something's going to need a bleed. So your books, when you guys make those, they'll also have bleeds. They're automatically set up if you use, which we won't get into yet, but they can be automatically set up, or it's just something that you decided. But it's usually always a 1/4 bleed all the way around. You don't really notice it, but if you have any plain colors or photographs, you do need to extend them past the actual edge. Gestalt theory, there's nothing in here that you haven't thought of before, but there's basically names for things. Like, you know that if you've got 3 things next to each other, they have more meaning. If they're scattered across, they don't relate to each other, but as soon as you put them next to each other, they're going to say something to each other. So a lot of everything we do for logos especially is how close is something? What relationship do they all of a sudden have? How can they look the same? If it's a very sharp thing, if it's a very rounded thing, your choices of fonts, all that good stuff will be influenced by what graphic you choose. Does it match? If you choose a really thick, chunky illustration and have a super delicate font, that doesn't really go together, and you'll feel it right away. They don't match. You guys know we all know what matches and doesn't match. Fonts and illustrations need to have the same language. They need to be drawn the same way, if you will. So this will help you think about that. The written component, as usual, is pretty short. Just the big part of deciding about your logo is who is it meant to be for? Is it general people? Anybody from, those who can read all the way up to our elders? Or is it like, are you the demographic? Is it kids? Is it specifically older folks? So think about who is your product for, first and foremost. And then your colors might be specific to you, your likes, dislikes. Or again, if you're thinking about a specific group, maybe you choose colors that they would like. It's hard to get away from 2D principles. You guys, they're in everything that we do. Whether you want to or not, you're going to be using line and shape and all that good stuff. So talk about that, just review it back. And then which of the principles of Gestalt. This is the same kind of a thing. Whether or not you think you're using the principles of Gestalt, you probably are using at least 3 simultaneously. It's just because the moment you have a couple shapes together, you're talking about how close they are, you're talking about are they similar, all this real basic stuff. So I'm just making you practice the naming. So project basics are make a logo, and then make a business card, And then I suggest making the brand guide. Technically, you could make the brand guide first, but the business card forces you to make decisions about things like background color. What about my other text? What can it be? What looks good with it? And that way you can apply it to the brand guide. Sometimes you can do them at the same time. That's totally fine too. But I do find it helps your brand guide to build something and realize, oh, I need to think about that too. So the big things about logos are typically, is it graphic heavy or is it text heavy? Like which one? It's usually rare that it's both, because it can be a little too much going on. You usually, we want logos to be simple and memorable. We don't want to have people puzzle over them and figure out, well, what is it that I'm looking at? That's usually not the goal. So we know all of these ones in a heartbeat. Whether we even read what the letters are, we recognize them partly because of their color, partly because of the way they're built. We just know them. So this is logo type, and that's simple. It's type-based. And then this one is a logo mark. Now, we all know that there's text associated with these, but the text is very, very simple. They aren't even needed once there's brand recognition. We all know that there's a red target, a blue Twitter, black, well, maybe you guys don't know this one, but we all know that they have text under it, but they are simple. So you get to choose which route you want to go. If you go more the logo mark, you still have to have a variation of your logo that actually has your text, right? Otherwise, we have no idea what you are, who you are. But these would be appropriate things, for example, like to show up on your social media. Just the graphic would show up, and then your text would be typed out someplace else. So what you might want to do is just start off with a typical 8.5 by 11, just a standard page. Start building your logo at the size that you feel like it would be seen the most. Always, though, shrink on screen to about 1 inch. And honestly, for social media, even smaller, to see if it's still legible. Does it still make sense? Is there too much going on? And if there is, you can either reduce it for all variations or just have a variation that is simpler. Again, it just comes down to legibility. And business card, you just want the basics. There are tons of templates online, so you can just go and find one online. It's not too hard. You'll get one in a heartbeat. I use these guys for my printing, so most of them are like this. Like you go and you got to download their template. You just make sure in this case you download the Illustrator version. They all have, there's lots of versions. And then you'll either whatever version of your logo, name of the company. Sometimes, you don't want to be too redundant. If you have, let's say, for example, you do a 2-sided business card. One side could just be your mark, and then the other side could have all the text stuff. So in this case, you just have to be careful you're not too redundant. Your name, all the basic stuff that you would assume should be on a business card. Make it all up. Nothing has to be real. The brand guide itself is probably about 4 pages. Because we're not addressing everything. It's just the bare minimum. So logo variations, your color stuff. Here's some student examples just to help. Let's see. Let's zoom out a bit. So for this one, and I think it's more fun to design your brand guide this way, like make your brand guide follow the rules of your brand guide. Add some color, have some fun with it. It's a lot more fun to design that way. So in this one, like everything has the colors. These are their marks. This is the way that the different possibilities for how to use the logo. Information about the fonts, the colors. For the colors, we want the hex numbers because everybody grabs those. They're easy, right? You just copy and paste that number combo and you just paste it into wherever you need. CMYKs you certainly can write out, and you do need the RGBs too. So RGBs, CMYKs, but for sure your hex number. So the hex number is just so you know that's a web number, but all the programs use them now. So they're the fastest way to just grab all that rather than having to punch in 66, 10, 20. They don't. There's separate slots for those things. So the fastest way is the hex number. A tiny little business card. Again, simple fronts. This is, the nice bare bones, just basic colors, information about the text and the logo background possibilities, and then your basic, here's There's the variations. For something like this, it might even be, I could see that a version for like a social media could be a circle with just flower in it. Something like that could be pretty relevant. You do all have to have, if you have a color version or multiple colors, you do have to have one that's black and white only or one color only. And we don't need them all the time, but more and more, it's probably more for printing. Like the one where I see this all the time, or if you sponsor like a little league or a sports team or something, your logos are going to get smashed along with 15 others on the back of a t-shirt, right? You don't have control over what color it's going to be on or what color they're going to print it, but it has to behave properly along with all of them. So you do need a black and white / one color version. You can also have two variations of that where one, let's say for instance, this one is well, we know this is probably going to turn black, right? It's already a one color version. You can also add a rectangle or a square if you'd rather like a dark color be on there and then your text be white. You can always add more stuff to make more possibilities for your logo to know what to do. So just imagine that you put all this work into a logo and then you're done with it, and then they hire someone else to do all the day-to-day stuff, and they just wreck the heck out of it because you didn't give enough details and they're just doing whatever they want. Your name is still attached to that, so you want to make sure you always give enough rules where they can't mess it up. I've got some little business cards there. This one has quite a few variations. One with the smaller text, one without, one black, one more white. They all work. Just depends on the context and what they're needed for. And then this one has primary colors and then the secondary colors. You can list things out like that. More variations. So lots of variations. With soccer ball, without soccer ball. Red and or black. So some will have more variations than others. It kind of depends on, how you really get into the project. Different variations that are acceptable, and then one. I would definitely say this one needs a black background. Just it'll pop better as one of the variations. But you get the idea there. And then some of these ones, just for fun, we go look at Creighton's. They're very specific, so, they've got an index. There's a lot of stuff in this one. Of course, it's all branded throughout with the correct fonts and all the correct colors. And then if there was somebody who was unfamiliar with Creighton, a lot of times businesses will put their history, their mission, whatever else that they think is pertinent for somebody to understand so that, so it could help the designer decide which direction to go into. And this is a lot. And this one, they even have a different one. I can't remember if this is it. They have one now that's because we've got the Phoenix location. Now they have one that's even for that one. So, and how the Creighton brand for that mixes with the other one. We're not going that far, of course, but there's a lot. We've all seen these variations. Here's all of them with all of the different colleges. And then, except for Hyder, you can see breaks the rules. That says a lot about our school right there. And then for it, our departments are underneath even further. Yeah. So they're really giving a lot of information. Here's the space that they want. Here's what they don't want you to do with the logo. They want to be able to see it, so don't put it on another blue. And so on and so forth. All of the fonts. And typically whenever anybody has these fonts, I'm not making you guys do this, but it is easy and nice to be able to see all these, right? Like at a heartbeat which variation you want to use, because it's just, you can see what might work better if you were doing a design. And some have more variations than others. So you can see they kind of keep going and going. This is one that has the primary color, which, surprise, surprise, is a blue. Annoyingly, this one is only for the presidential stuff, and it's barely different, really, from this to this. At a distance, it's kind of negligible, but this one is only allowed for president, if I remember right. We used to have more colors. There was greens and a brown and a orange, but they've eliminated it for this round. That our website used to have those little bits of color, and not anymore. Anyway, you get the idea. These are all the programs now, not even programs, different things that Creighton has within it, and they call them marks. But they all have to have the colors. Oh, so you can see some of the prior colors, oranges and yellows and greens, that are no longer here. They all have to have those blues if they're going to be part of Creighton's stuff. So they can look different, but they all have to somehow fit with the brand a little bit. And now their thing is a slash. Before, it was prisms all over everything, and the backs of the PowerPoints and everything. And now it's a slash. So every couple of years, people redo their brand guides in order to stay on top of the trends, basically. Don't do this. Funny stuff. And they've got even more icons than they used to. So, by comparison, our 4-page is pretty simple. But if you are a designer at some point in your life, you'll probably have to do a brand guide. Let me go back to our page here. So, our first thing is going to be that we're going to look. Let me go open up our calendar. So, we're going to have 2 days where, because I don't want you guys to work on a logo, do everything for the logo, and then you have to fix everything, right? That could be kind of annoying. So instead, we're going to look at your logo only first. You're welcome to think about the brand guide, work ahead a little bit if you want to, but I would wait for most of it until you know your logo for sure, like how it's looking and all that. And then the next week, we'll actually look at it inside the brand guide itself. Now, since we are not learning InDesign until after this, you're going to build your brand guide, since it's only 4 pages or so, in Illustrator. We're going to use multiple artboards, the same way that you guys are doing the still lifes in different pages for their different variations. Same thing. So if you have questions about that, of course, come to me with them. But I'm not going to shift and have you move one part of the project into the other. But in normal life, we would build all that stuff in Illustrator and then place everything in InDesign. So you'll see that when we're in InDesign, like, oh yeah, that's made for multiple pages. That makes sense. But for our tiny little guy, it'll totally be fine. And then as a quick look at our calendar, because time is going. We have the 15th, where I'm not requiring us to meet, because you're going to be working on it's an exercise to get you ready for the book. So the exercise is just learn how to place some images, learn how to deal with text, so that by the time you walk into the book, you're like, I got this. It's going to be easy enough. So for this exercise, kind of like the Illustrator ones, I give you a file, I give you some images. You are welcome to go and find your own if you want to. It's just, you're just making a simple little thing for I think it was biology department. I usually have people do them for their own areas, and that's totally fine. But it's just a really simple exercise to get you acquainted. And then you're going to be working on your book. So when we meet up the next time, I'm not looking at your book in terms of in front of everybody, because content, I want you guys to make a book that's personal to you. And honestly, for most of it, it's not really about the design we're looking at. You're just learning how to use InDesign and put all the images in there. So in terms of design, it's like we don't want to look through everybody's 20 pages of photos. That'll take a really long time. So we're not looking at that. And then we're going to talk about the website stuff. So website stuff scares people. I make it as bare bones and simple as possible. The whole start with a blank nothing to having a page that works. You'll have one in a couple hours. It's actually less than that. So don't be scared of that part. I really have taken it from let's do multiple pages and figure out a lot of stuff to let's just figure out what's most important. If you guys ever have internships, which you probably likely will, they often are going to expect you guys to do the websites, or at least to maintain them. They're usually already done, but they're going to want you to go in and maybe add a photo, So this way, you'll know what you can do. If you want to change a color in code, it's super simple. You just got to know where to find it. So you're not going to be able to do, you know, all the 50,000 things. You'll be able to do just enough to say that you're able to, if that makes sense. Like, yes, I have edited in a CMS before, and they're like, great, that's what we need. So that's what we have coming up. So logos next. If you're having trouble figuring out what this logo should be, I can help you brainstorm a little bit. But when in doubt, do one for yourself. You'll need one at some point. It's really nice to be able to have that. Depending on your major, like the art students typically will go a little bit more heavy on design than a business major will, or maybe a bio major will, because they're not sure, like, how am I going to use this? When you have your CV, you're going to want something that looks different than just something that can be typed out. And speaking of typing out, if you're going to use a text-based logo, which is absolutely fine, just remember to modify the text enough so that I can't just pop in Word, find your font, and type it out. It needs to be something that is specific enough to you, even though it looks maybe pretty simple, that you have actually changed it. And there's no way that some random person can just type it out and get it exact. So simple is fine, font-based is fine, just enough design to make it yours and yours only. All right. Questions? So I do recommend that you sketch first. I'm not going to require the sketches, but I do recommend that you, especially those of you guys who are doing graphic parts, sketch them out. You can work through your ideas a lot faster on paper. Remember, whenever you guys are doing text equals a scribble. Don't write it out unless it's like 2 letters. Okay, you can draw those out because that might be more important. But typically, a line of text is literally a squiggle, and the smaller text is just a line. It's just to help us figure out length of things. Think about, if you have a long name, 2 lines instead of 1. We typically try to avoid a logo that's like really, really wide because it's difficult to deal with on a lot of stuff. So squares work good, rectangles work good, but just try to avoid something super long. And if you really like a super long version, have one that can be made shorter or onto 2 or 3 lines. I'm happy to look at these for you before we look at them in class. Have multiple variations. You don't have to decide yet. Maybe you try different fonts, you try different colors, you can try different graphics. We're going to be your sounding board for this. So multiple versions is absolutely fine for this project. It's not going to change too much in terms of timing. I don't think people can vote. That makes it easier. You just say, here's my 3. Which one do you all like better? We quickly get a show of hands and boom. You can still disagree and choose, but it's nice to just get a consensus if you really want to know how people are viewing it. All right, so that's what's coming up. As usual, I will be available for help. And I can, if you're stuck on something that you want to do and you just can't figure it out, send me your AI along with your question, and I can work something out. All right, everybody. Have fun making logos. Have fun collecting your stuff for the books. The books, honestly, it's a really fun project. It can be very personal. Remember, if you're like, what do I do for gifts this year? Books.